Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for coming, and we're back in the auditorium. I'm Carolyn Cohn-Weaver, and I'm going to be reading from Dave Barry's 2024 in review. Last year, I did his 2023, and I came across this column, and I thought, got to do it again. He's no longer in the Miami Herald, but his column does run occasionally in a little newspaper that a cousin of mine has subscribed to me. It's mailed to me. It's called Funny Times. And so this was in the March 2025 issue. Dave Barry's 2024 in review. How stupid was 2024? Let's start with the art world, which over the centuries has given humanity so many beautiful, timeless masterpieces. This year, the biggest story involving art by far was that a cryptocurrency businessman paid $6.2 million at Sotheby's auction for a banana, which he ate. Quote, "It's much better than other bananas," he told the press. What made 2024 truly special in terms of sustained idiocy was that it was an election year. This meant that day after day, month after month, the average American voter was subjected to a relentless, gushing spew of campaign messaging created by political professionals who, no matter what side they were on, all share one unshakable core belief, which is that the average American voter has the intellectual capacity of a potted fern. It was a brutal, depressing slog, and it felt as though it would never end. In fact, it may still be going on in California, a state that apparently tabulates its ballots on a defective Etch-a-Sketch. For most of us, though, the elections and this insane year are finally over. But before we move on to whatever, God help us, lies ahead, let's ingest our anti-nausea medication and take one last cringing look back at the events of 2024, starting with January. Thanks to our political system, under which the nominees for the most powerful office in the world are chosen by approximately 73 people in approximately 4 rural states, while the vast majority of Americans are still taking down their Christmas decorations, we once again find ourselves facing a choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Both candidates carry baggage. Trump is wanted on criminal charges in something like 23 states, and if elected, could become the first president to govern from a secret hideout. His speeches are sounding increasingly unhinged, which is no small feat since he did not sound particularly hinged in the first place. For his part, President Biden keeps saying words that do not appear in any known human language and gives the impression that any day now he's going to shuffle into a state dinner wearing only a bathrobe, but not necessarily his bathrobe. In other words, we have one candidate who lost the last election but claims he won it, and another candidate who won the last election but might not remember what year that was. America, the choice is yours. Meanwhile, the nation is facing a number of serious problems. Foremost among them is the situation on the border with Mexico, which at one time was a legally separate nation from the United States, but is now basically functioning as a vestibule. This has resulted in a tense confrontation between the federal government and Texas, which is alarming because, in the words of one military analyst, Texas has way more guns. In a troubling aviation incident, an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 9 flying at 16,000 feet suddenly develops a refrigerator-sized hole in the fuselage when an improperly attached panel blows off, terrifying passengers who have reason to wonder whether the airline crew instead of making a big deal about the position of everybody's tray table, should maybe be checking to see if the plane has been correctly bolted together. As a safety precaution, the Federal Aviation Administration grounds all MAX 9s and advises passengers on other Boeing aircraft to avoid sitting near windows. For its part, Boeing states that at least the plane didn't lose a really important part, like one of the, what do you call it, wings. In February, Special Counsel Robert Hur concludes his year-long investigation into Joe Biden's handling of classified documents by releasing a 388-page report concluding that Biden does not appear to have all his oars in the water. An angry Biden immediately holds a press conference during which he heatedly denies Hur's assassin, and this really happened, refers to Egyptian leader Abdel Fattah el-Sisi as the president of Mexico. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, who is appearing in court more often than Perry Mason, is found guilty by a New York civil judge on charges of financial fraud, aiding and abetting, aggravated contempt, disorderly obstruction, second-degree vagrancy, and loitering with intent to conspire. The judge fines Trump nearly $500 million and bans him for the next 3 years from riding in any motorcade more than 6 cars long. 2 days later, a defiant Trump attends an event called SneakerCon, where this also really happened. He unveils a line of footwear, including the gold-colored Never Surrender high-top sneaker. Tucker Carlson conducts a 2-hour interview with Vladimir Putin, offering Westerners a rare opportunity to find out what the Russian leader really thinks. It turns out he thinks Tucker Carlson is a useful idiot. In March, President Biden, seeking to dispel persistent rumors that he is an elderly man, delivers a State of the Union address consisting almost entirely of shouting. This performance does not significantly improve his poll numbers, but it's a big hit with the members of the Washington Press Corps, several hundred of whom decide independently to describe this speech as fiery. Yet another federal budget crisis is averted at the last minute when Congress passes a $1.2 trillion spending bill, which will enable the government to keep spending insanely more money than it takes in. The US debt is now growing at the rate of $1 trillion every 100 days. But fortunately, this is not a problem because it will be taken care of by future generations. No problem. Just put it on our tab, is the view of future generations. And that is why we love them. In other high finance news, Donald Trump's lawyers tell a New York court that he cannot raise the nearly $500 million he needs for an appeal bond, having been turned down by more than 30 bond companies and an individual known as Anthony Tony Three Nostrils Avocado. Trump gets a break when an appeals court lowers the amount to $175 million, which Trump says he definitely has, although he left it in his other pants. In a possibly related development, Trump announces that he is selling, we are not making this up, God Bless the USA Bibles for $59.95 a pop. It's my favorite book, he states, moments before being struck by lightning. No, that did not happen, and you are a bad person for even fantasizing about it. In aviation news, a Boeing plane flying from Australia to New Zealand suddenly goes into a nosedive, injuring 50 people. Another Boeing plane taking off from the San Francisco airport loses a piece of landing gear. A Boeing spokesperson says that the company, after conducting an in-depth review, has tentatively identified the root cause of the recent problems. We think it's gravity, said the spokesperson. It seems to be getting worse. In April, the nation is enthralled by a total eclipse, a rare celestial occurrence in which the Earth, Sun, and Moon align in such a way as to cause a large number of people to deliberately travel to Indianapolis. Huge crowds in the path of the totality watch excitedly as the sky gradually turns completely dark, a spectacular sight that most people will never witness again in their lifetimes, unless they're still around at sunset. In other natural phenomena, a magnitude 4.8 earthquake with an epicenter in central New Jersey rattles the Northeast. New York City is completely paralyzed, although not because of the earthquake. It's always completely paralyzed. But for a few seconds, there is slightly less honking. New York remains in the news with the onset of the single most exciting thing ever to happen to CNN, yet another trial of Donald Trump. In this one, he's charged with falsifying business records as part of a scheme to guarantee that every single human being on the planet, including members of primitive tribes in the Amazon jungle, would be aware that Trump had a one-night stand with porn star Stormy Daniels. At least that's how it worked out. True fact. The first witness called by the prosecution is a man named David Pecker. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, a contender to be Trump's running mate, bolsters her case with a new book in which she reveals, apparently on the advice of the same public relations firm used by Boeing, that she once shot and killed her family dog, Cricket. President Biden, campaigning in Pennsylvania, suggests twice that his uncle was eaten by cannibals after his plane went down off the New Guinea coast during World War II. The Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea objects to the president's cannibal story on the nitpicky grounds that it's not true. Nevertheless, the president seems to sincerely believe that it happened, and it was his uncle, damn it. In May, Stormy Daniels tells a New York jury in explicit detail about her encounter with Donald Trump during a 2006 celebrity golf tournament, testifying that when she came out of the bathroom in Trump's hotel suite, he was waiting for her wearing only a t-shirt and boxer shorts, and before she could stop him, he proceeded to falsify business records. True trivia fact. Trump finished 62nd in that celebrity tournament. The golfer who finished 43rd was Dan Quayle. On weekends, when he's not in court, Trump continues to campaign for president. While discussing immigration policy at a rally in New Jersey, he makes the following statement, printed here verbatim. Silence of the Lambs. Has anyone ever seen The Silence of the Lambs? The late, great Hannibal Lecter is a wonderful man. He oftentimes would have a friend for dinner. Remember the last scene? Excuse me, I'm about to have a friend for dinner. As this poor doctor walked by, I'm about to have a friend for dinner. But Hannibal Lecter, congratulations, the late, great Hannibal Lecter. This statement raises a number of questions, including 1, what? 2, seriously, what? 3, is it possible that it was actually Hannibal Lecter who ate Joe Biden's uncle? Speaking of Joe Biden, his poll numbers continue to be bad as voters express their unhappiness about the economy, especially inflation. Does this sound familiar? This is an offside comment. This is very frustrating for White House spokespersons who are constantly pointing out that inflation is no longer a problem on whatever planet it is that White House spokespersons live on. Unfortunately, it's still a problem here on Earth where prices are significantly higher for basic needs such as food, gas, housing, and housing, and tickets to the Met Gala, which cost only $50,000 last year, but jumped to $75,000 this year, leaving many attendees so broke that they are forced to attend wearing what appear to be Halloween costumes. In other presidential news, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., seeking to set himself apart from the two flawed major party candidates and offer voters a rational alternative, tells the New York Times that doctors found a dead worm in his brain. As the month draws to a close, Trump is found guilty on all 34 felony counts of whatever it is that he was charged with. The convictions deal a fatal blow to his candidacy. Ha ha. We are, of course, joking. The convictions, like all the other legal actions against Trump, are a massive boost to his candidacy, energizing his supporters and generating tens of millions of dollars in donations, an outcome that could have been predicted by anybody with a rudimentary understanding of Trump's appeal, although it apparently did not occur to the geniuses behind this particular legal strategy. Little sip. Speaking of strategies that do not work out as planned, in June, the Biden reelection campaign struggles to change the public perception, largely created by videos showing the president looking lost and confused, that the president is sometimes lost and confused. Democrats insist that these videos are cheap fakes and that, in fact, Biden is sharp as a tack. But unfortunately, the public never sees this because he only exhibits the sharpness when there are no cameras around to capture it, kind of like Bigfoot. So there's a lot on the line when Biden and Trump square off in a much anticipated primetime debate, which was proposed by the Biden campaign, apparently on the advice of the Boeing Corporation. It's obvious from the start of the debate that the president is struggling. He has trouble finishing or even starting his sentences. He spends much of the debate staring vacantly into the distance, like a man who's trying to remember where he put the remote control, unaware of the fact that he's holding it. In short, it's a very bad night for Biden. Question: how bad is it? Answer: it's so bad that by comparison, Donald Trump seems at times to be almost lucid. Actually, it's worse than that. It's so bad that even professional journalists can see how bad it is. In fact, suddenly everybody in Washington is acutely aware of the president's decline, which previously had been apparent to only the entire rest of the world population. And so we move into July. The Democrats are in a state of panic. Behind the scenes, party leaders desperately want to get Biden off the ticket, but he repeatedly insists that he's going to be the candidate. Just when it appears that the presidential race cannot get any more insane, Trump goes to Butler, Pennsylvania to hold a campaign rally for which the security has apparently been outsourced to the Boeing Corporation. Trump is shot in the ear by a man who is somehow able to climb unimpeded with a rifle onto the roof of a building that not only is within range of the speaker's platform, but also has 3 police snipers stationed inside it. Really? The attempted assassination shocks the nation, but also bolsters Trump's popularity. He has a commanding lead in the polls as, a few days later, he accepts the presidential nomination at the Republican convention with a triumphant speech lasting slightly longer than veterinary school. The Democrats are now in utter despair. Biden continues to insist that he's running. The party has no choice but to renominate him and face almost certain defeat in November. Then, in a sudden reversal, Biden announces that he's quitting the race after reassessing the situation and waking up next to the severed head of a thoroughbred racehorse. Party leaders lavishly praise Biden for saving democracy, then decide, via what is undoubtedly a democratic process, to replace him with Kamala Harris. In August, the race for the presidency kicks into high gear as fired up Democrats hold their convention in Chicago. The first day highlight is a grateful and heartfelt farewell to President Biden, who speaks in the prestigious 2:30 a.m. time slot and is never heard from again. The focus then shifts to the nomination of Kamala Harris, who is running on a platform of joy and being joyful and a general vibe of joyfulness, as well as a set of policies to be specified later that will take America in a new, completely different direction, in stark contrast to the policies of whoever is running the country now. The convention gives Harris an immediate boost in the polls, and suddenly Trump faces a serious challenge, to which he responds during a 2-hour speech to a rally in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. I say that I'm much better looking than her. Much better, much better. I'm a better looking person than Kamala. Fox News confirms this. Independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., following up on the revelation that he has a dead worm in his brain, reveals that he once picked up a roadkill bear, which he later, we've all done it, left under a bicycle in Central Park as a prank. 3 weeks later, Kennedy suspends his campaign and urges his followers to vote for Trump, assuming they are able to chew through their restraints. 2 astronauts are stuck aboard the International Space Station when the Starliner spacecraft that was supposed to return them to Earth develops mechanical problems. You will never in a million years guess the name of the company that built this spacecraft. Meanwhile, down here on Earth, things are also not going so great as we move into September. In a televised debate with Harris, during which Trump gives the impression that his debate press consisted entirely of getting his hair dyed a slightly more believable color, he says, in Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live here. For her part, Harris repeatedly stresses the message that she is a regular middle-class person from the middle class who totally relates to the problems faced by middle-class people like herself. And she definitely intends to fix these problems once she is elected to high government office. A week after the debate, police capture a would-be assassin who was spotted with a rifle on a golf course where Trump was playing. There was a time in America when this event, the second serious assassination attempt on a major presidential candidate in 2 months, would be considered a big story. But in the hellscape that is 2024 politics, it dominates the headlines for considerably less time than the mythical pet-eating Haitians. As the election draws closer, emotions are running high. It's also an increasingly tense time in the Middle East, where Israel and Iran appear to be on the verge of all-out war. But the good news is that at least the hurricane season has been relatively peaceful. Okay, scratch that. In late September, Hurricane Helene causes horrendous devastation in 6 southeastern states. And then in October, Hurricane Milton ravages Florida. It's a brutally difficult time for millions of Americans, but the good news is that at least nobody tries to politicize the disasters or use them to spread idiotic conspiracy theories about sinister forces controlling the weather. Okay, scratch that also. In presidential election news, Trump makes a campaign appearance at a Pennsylvania McDonald's, during which he wears an apron and serves some people at the drive-through window. This is the kind of hokey photo op stunt that politicians have been doing forever. So you would think that this was no big deal, right? Wrong. It's a huge deal. Thanks to Trump's uncanny ability, it is his superpower to drastically reduce the functional IQ of professional journalists. This event dominates the national political coverage for days. Newsweek runs a story headlined, "Was Donald Trump's McDonald's shift staged?" The New York Times runs six, that's right, six stories about it, including one asserting that, among other infractions, Trump shoveled a scoopful of fries the wrong way and committed what apparently appeared to be a number of health code violations. Somehow, Trump survives all of this journalism. He continues to crisscross the nation, promising tax breaks for pretty much every category of US resident, including domestic animals, and giving increasingly improvisational speeches during which every thought fragment that seeps into his brain spurts instantly from his mouth without any kind of review. For example, speaking to a rally in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, Trump informs the crowd that their beloved hometown hero, the late Arnold Palmer, had an unusually large putter. On the Democratic side, the Kamala Harris campaign, which has spent more than $1 billion but is still struggling to clearly define the candidate's vision for the presidency, settles on an upbeat closing message. Whoever she is, she's not Donald Trump. In space, a large communications satellite unexpectedly explodes, creating debris that threatens other satellites. In the spirit of mercy, we will not name the company that made the defective satellite, other than to say it rhymes with blowing. Speaking of unexpected, in November, the voters finally go to the polls for the most important American election since at least the dawn of time. All the expert political analysts and professional pollsters using scientific methodology agree that the race is extremely tight, a toss-up, a dead heat, especially in the crucial battleground states. It's too close to call. The experts are certain of this. On election night, the TV networks are teeming with political commentators prepared to analyze and dissect and crunch the numbers far into the night as the nation settles in for the long, grueling process of determining the winner, a process that everyone agrees could go on for days, possibly even weeks, because of the extreme razor-thin closeness of the, never mind. In roughly the same amount of time it takes to air a Geico commercial, the networks determined that Donald Trump has decisively won the election, including all of the so-called battleground states and 4 Canadian provinces. It's a stunning result and a massive failure by the expert political analysts who humbly admit that they had no idea what was happening and promise that from now on, they will be more aware of their limitations. We are, of course, joking. In a matter of seconds, these experts pivot from being spectacularly clueless about what was happening in the election to confidently explaining what happened in the election. For his part, Donald Trump has no doubt whatsoever that the American people have given him a mandate to deport anywhere up to 60% of the US population and, in his words, turn this great nation around by appointing wildly unqualified individuals to the cabinet. Okay, he didn't actually say that, but he did nominate Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General, which is like nominating Jeffrey Dahmer to be Surgeon General. Gates is soon forced to withdraw his name from consideration after Trump is informed that the US Senate, for all its shortcomings, is not completely insane. Another controversial Trump nomination, this one for Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, is Robert F. Roadkill Kennedy Jr., who used to think Trump was basically Hitler, but now thinks he's great. Kennedy is deeply suspicious of vaccines, big pharma, the CIA, fluoride, sea oils, Wi-Fi, Fruit Loops, and chemicals in general. He also wants to make America healthy again by reducing the consumption of the overprocessed junk foods that have turned many Americans into big, fat, waddling tubs of lard, like many Americans. In December, Joe Biden, who repeatedly promised that he would not pardon his son Hunter, cements his legacy as the most Joe Biden president ever by pardoning his son Hunter, thus forcing the Democratic Party to change its mantra from nobody is above the law to, hey, it's complicated. The wording of the pardon document is quite broad, covering all offenses committed between 2014 and 2024, including any currently unsolved bank robberies, not that we're suggesting anything. The pardon outrages many Republicans who would be fine with it if Trump did it, while it's fine with many Democrats who would be outraged if Trump did it. For that is how our system of checks and balances works. Meanwhile, Trump is acting as though he is already the president, meeting with foreign leaders, signing treaties, vetoing legislation, authorizing drone strikes, and ordering the beheading of Peach and Blossom, the two turkeys Biden pardoned for Thanksgiving. Helping Trump with the transition is his new best billionaire friend, Elon Musk, the genius tech visionary who's going to make the federal government efficient by implementing outside the box measures, such as having veterinarians install locator chips in all federal employees, replacing both the Air Force and the Internal Revenue Service with laser-equipped orbital space robots, combining the departments of energy, transportation, labor, agriculture, interior, and justice into a single agency called the Gov, which will be physically located in Taiwan, but accessible via an app, renting Hawaii out for proms. It's an exciting time to be alive as post-election America begins to discover with varying degrees of excitement what it voted for. Clearly, this year needs to end, which is why we're looking forward to New Year's Eve, when, in a beloved tradition, thousands of revelers will gather in Times Square to say goodbye to 2024 and welcome 2025. We like to think that on that night, as the seconds tick down to zero and that giant ball starts to descend, the people gazing up at it will all be united, if for only for a moment, by a common hope. A hope shared by the millions of us watching on television. Specifically, the hope that the giant ball was not manufactured by the Boeing Corporation. Also, while we're hoping, let's hope that 2025 will be a better year. How could it be worse? Try not to think about it. Thank you, Dave Barry.